So the NDC launched a manifesto on Saturday. Tonight, we're going to unpack that a bit more and have a conversation with the minority spokesperson on the economy. One of the things we always will do is to start with the numbers. We were counting how many promises can we find in that document. 680 at least is what we counted in that very bulky document. And we're going to be interrogating that because the numbers by themselves tell a story. Going into 2025 with the economy where it is, can you realistically expect that under this challenging economy, you can expect to implement 680 promises? We'll ask that question when we sit for a conversation. And then we'll look at the breakdown of the promises over the period. And one of the things that we're noticing is the economy is the focus. And if you do a counting of the promises, you'll find far many promises in that sector, the economic sector, than any other sector. Why? Because obviously we are facing unprecedented economic challenges, and every government will now focus on trying to recover what has been destroyed over the last few years with the economic crisis that we are in. And so that's why both parties are focusing quite heavily on the economy. But if you're tracking the sheer number of promises over a period for the NDC, you see that this year, going into 2025, is the highest we've had yet for the NDC when it comes to the sheer number of interventions you're proposing to implement if they win. Because compare that to what you had, for example, in 2020, it was 617. And then you come to 2016, the year they lost that election, they had 666 we counted. And then you come to 2012, when they won the elections, 569. Now, the key thing to obviously ask is between 2012 when they won and 2016 when they lost, how many of the 569 did they implement? But going into 2025 and beyond, it is significantly more. Is it that the challenges that this country is facing, they've seen even more challenging times, and so you need to prescribe even more proposals to try and deal with? Well, that tells just a bit of the story. A few things that we also looked at in terms of some of the promises that are similar to what they've had before in their manifesto, isolating just a few for you to look at. The three-shift system, this very famous 24-hour economy policy that has become the flagship for the NDC, is actually not new. It was in their 2020 manifesto, but it wasn't as sexy because they simply couched it as a three-shift economy that operates 24 hours. This year, you simply think about it as the 24-hour economy, and that has caught on quite strongly. It wasn't only one that was in the 2020 manifesto, it was something that you can also find in the NDPC program, right? But people have caught on, it's become their flagship, and I'm grateful that we can talk to the man who speaks for them on the economy. We will start with the 24-hour economy. What is it? What animal is it? And let's drill down to the specifics. John Mahama did a brilliant job over the weekend when he sort of gave us a very pictorial breakdown of what this is. We'll use that for some of the probing tonight. Also, 1 million youth in coding. It was there in 2020. It's back in 2024. Obviously, it's important for the party, and so they're repeating it. And then you talk about the big push. $10 billion was in 2020. First time we heard it is back in 2024. But the big question is 10 billion. Where's the party going to get 10 billion in an economy that is facing all the significant challenges, unprecedented economic crisis in a generation? So key question there to ask. And then we talk about the VAT changes that they are proposing. That again was there before. But then some of the major commitments, you've heard it already, the flagship is 24-hour economy. Then you have the issues around re-engaging with the IMF. And we'll ask them, so what exactly do they want to change with the IMF program? Why they are going to re-engage? We'll get that detail for you. Consider Public Debt Management Office. Why? Because debt is a reason why we are in crisis. Debt is the reason why people like us, with small bonds that we bought, took haircuts, and our monies became very uncertain, etc. So they want to control that. Consider Public Debt Management Office. And then they also tell us that they want a free level 100 education, and that is one thing that was also caught on with the young folks going into the level 100 freshers. So again, Funding is an issue. Scrapping is gratia. That will save us some money, by the way. So that obviously for many, there's a consensus around. And 30% women in political appointments is good for those who believe gender equity we need to strive at. But if you look at the social interventions, the NDC is promising quite a bit of that, establishing this Ghana Medical Care Trust Fund. Listen to Mahama yesterday. He's challenging John Mahama to tell him one social intervention program that he's introducing this time. There's a lot in the 2024 manifesto. This is one. Also, free tertiary education for the those with persons with disabilities. One of the things that they are proposing. Plus, Women in Development Bank for our women. Free sanitary pads for students is also one that the NDC is proposing to do in 2025 if they win. And then a national apprenticeship program. Many people need jobs, but they need the training first to be able to qualify for these jobs. They want to introduce that in 2025 if they win. Then corruption. I'm pretty sure you've heard this now, Operation Recover or Loot. And you know who this is targeted at. It's targeted at the incumbent government and its officials. They want to go after them in 2025. But also they want to investigate a goal for oil policy, which Bawumia says is their trump card for trying to slow down the depreciation of the city. The NDC says they want to review that. Audit national cathedral expenditure. Big deal for the government. Create a new scholarship scheme that is based on merit and not political exposure. And then the taxes, though, they are going to scrap. It's also a key thing that we need to watch. E-levy is one. We're talking about the COVID levy 2 will go, according to the party. Betting tax will go. And then you also have emissions levy also going. And the industrial and agricultural import levies will also go. Now, we have to ask the question about this. What is the projected revenue from these taxes? That will then tell you how much you will lose if you scrap. And then you have to ask the natural follow-up question, how are you bridging that gap and plugging that hole that will be left when you scrap it in an economy that is broke? Stay with me. And my guest is seated for a conversation tonight. Isaac Adongo is here. We'll ask him a few questions about the NDC 2024 manifesto. And PMSS is always brought to you by Syntex Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Academic times also, and no matter your water needs, Syntex Tank has all you need. You want to call them across the country because you can find them and they have bespoke offerings for you. They have 7 years warranty also. 0244 335 168. You can shop online at syntexgh.com. Syntex Tanks, are you strong, are you tough? Now, the Academic Times Ghana is an incoming graphic and online publication aiming to collaborate with university authorities and students to ensure that student research is published in summary form. Now, this is to bridge the gap between students' research and policymakers. Students spend a lot of resources doing their final year research, either for their undergraduate, master's, or PhD. The question is, what is the significance of the research if the relevant stakeholders do not get to read or hear about it? Students' research must make an impact by contributing to the national and institutional developments through collaboration with seasoned researchers, experienced lecturers, and other experts in the field of research. These students will be given the needed guidance to ensure that their research is conducted by the scientific principles to which their studies relate. Additionally, the Academic Times Ghana will collaborate with organizations to ensure that students who cannot finance their research are sponsored to get the needed financial support to do their research properly. The Academic Times Ghana coming soon. The Academic Times Ghana developing institutional and national policies through research. My guest is with me in the studio. Isaac Adongo is a minority spokesperson on finance, but when it comes to the Manifesto 2024, he is the party spokesperson on the economic sector, and I'm delighted that I can have him. And it's good to have you because, as I said, when you do the counting of the various promises and you sort of cluster it, you find majority of the focus of what you're promising to do is in the economic sector for obvious reasons. But one thing struck me, 608, let's start with the big picture. 608 promises in all is what your manifesto is promising to deliver. But this is an economy you have maintained is broke. How do you implement 680 promises in a broke economy? That certainly doesn't add up.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning to your viewers. 680 without putting the fiscal impact doesn't give you anything. There are some of the promises that really do not add up to big funds that you require to implement. And so you need to look at the aggregate implication or the fiscal impact of the totality of the policies. But the most important thing is that if you look at the manifesto itself, in the manifesto, there are policies that were put in place, particularly in the area of managing the fiscal expenditures that should be able to help provide for some of those spending that we're talking about. So it is not all about just looking for new money, but it is also about rationalizing existing expenditure to move away from consumption expenditure and to put the money where we can generate the growth, the money where we can support the people, the money where we can alleviate the hardships that the people of Ghana are going through. And if you go through the details, you would appreciate that a lot of work will be done to realign our collective objectives in line with the envelope that we have.
And we'll come to the specifics, and there's a lot to unpack there. But there's something that John Mahama said in January that struck me when I saw the number 680 promises. Speaking to NDC supporters in Hohoe, in the Volta region, it says, quote, "I am being very measured in the promises that I make because we know the crisis that the country is currently facing and has been plunged in. We will show you the books and finances of this country, and you realize the harm that the new Patriotic Party administration has done to this country. The economy is broke." So in January, he says he's going to be measured in the promises that he's making and will make because he understands that the economy is in crisis and is broke. So what has changed? 680 doesn't appear to be somebody who is measured.
It's not the number of promises. It is the quantum of the envelope. And I'm saying that if you look at the activities or the programs that we have planned and the policies that we have put together that are geared towards providing some level of realignment, you would understand that these can be funded. Okay? For instance, if you look at the fact that he is intending to run one of the leanest and efficient government, okay, you are going to have a situation where you are moving away from somebody who was running 125 ministers to somebody running 60 ministers. You can put together the numbers and you will see the savings that you are going to make in order to implement some of these programs. Again, we are very clear that even for the biggest of the expenditures, we are very clear how we are going to do it. For instance, if you take the $10 billion...
the big push.
It's not going to sit on government budget.
Where is it going to sit?
So I'm going to explain to you. And we have done it before. We have a track record of doing that.
Let's explain that because
once you brought it up. So we developed the Temahabo with $1.5 billion that didn't sit on government budget.
That's MPS?
Yes. We built Terminal 3 without putting it on government budget. So
that's the Ghana Infrastructure Fund.
Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. And if you read the manifesto clearly, you would understand that our focus is to leverage PPP, but also to leverage development finance to provide the vehicle that will finance these activities. And let me give you an example. If you decide that you are going to dualize Accra-Kumasi Road, and you estimate that it will cost, say, $400 million, and you can have Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund going out there and leveraging government capacity to reach out to multilateral institutions, Afri-Exim, Africa Development Bank, IFC, okay, to provide that level of funding that assists the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund to raise, say, even if it is $500 million, and say that we want to set up a vehicle. Which vehicle government would become a stakeholder with $500 million, use the $500 million to leverage another $500 million, that gives you $1 billion. That $1 billion, if the road from Accra to Kumasi is $400 million, what you need is the government is bringing $200 million, and the private sector investors who are interested in this project are bringing $200 million.
But the two projects you cited, the MPS project and the Terminal 1 project in the port and the airport development project, all happened at a time when Ghana was relatively credit-worthy. Yeah, we're no longer credit-worthy.
That is the reason why...
We're no longer credit-worthy. So how are you going to attract that investment?
That is the reason why we are developing a vehicle That reduces the long hand of government. You want to introduce more private sector-led initiatives that is able to insulate the government away from the risk that we have been plunged into. And that the investor taking the money through a development finance arrangement with a private sector arrangement allows government to still source $10 billion without it being on the government debt.
But why would the private sector give Ghana money at this time?
Why won't is the private sector still not investing in Ghana? Are you suggesting that if a private sector...
Today in Ghana,
yes, if a private sector entity...
You said this economic rundown.
No, that economic rundown...
Why would anybody invest so much money put bets on this economy?
I trust the private sector more than government. I trust the private sector more than government because the private sector has certain attitudes and principles and risk management beliefs that allows the investor to recoup his money. And we want to introduce programs that allow us to leverage this private sector arrangement without necessarily suffering the long hand of government in those activities.
So the 10 billion, all of it is the private sector?
A lot of it is private sector.
What percentage is public sector?
So those activities that are properly and better delivered by the private sector, you don't expect government to deliver them. If, for instance, we want to do renewable energy, and we're able to set up an arrangement that allows renewable energy to be fed through the West African power pool, so we can export that energy after we have used them in Ghana to our landlocked countries, for instance, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. And we have done it before. You remember we used GRICO to source funding from Alliance Française de Développement to retool our transmission lines. We started from Huni Valley to Kumasi. The recent power station that was commissioned in Kumasi was that project. Okay? We did that and continued retooling all the way to Techima and built a bigger transmission line there. In fact, Kimpnampo. We continued to Tamale and developed a bigger one and continued all the way to Navrongo with new and improved transmission lines that allows us to evacuate power to our neighboring countries. We didn't do it on government budget. We did it on the balance sheet of GRIDCO. That is the ingenuity with which we are coming to run this.
How much?
But where I'm coming, so where you are dealing with social services, for instance, you are dealing with education infrastructure. You don't expect the private sector to build schools for our citizens. You expect that to be on government budget. If you are building hospitals, you expect that to be on government budget. Okay? We estimate that the big projects are the ones that the private sector will take, and we estimate that over a period of 4 years, it will be about $3 billion that will go through the budget.
So $3 billion?
Yes.
Over
4 years. That's about $750 million a year.
So that's what government's contribution will be to the $10 billion? Push.
That is for social services.
Okay.
Activities that do not lend itself to private sector participation.
But here's the thing, though. You know this.
Yes.
You do not have the fiscal space for that sort of layout, right?
How are you calculating that fiscal space?
Because, just a second, you know that based on the negotiations we've done with our external creditors and bilateral creditors, a lot of that is deferred pain.
Yes.
Whoever wins 2025 and beyond, you will bear that pain.
Yes.
So I'm looking at the terms that we reached with our Eurobond, creditors, for example. If you put it together between 2024 to 2037, we are looking at some $12.45 billion that we have to pay.
And we'll restrict ourselves to the next 4 years.
And then you look at the next, on an average, you're talking about, I'm breaking it down annually. Yeah. On the average, annually, you're talking about some $558 million a year over the period. Yes. So in your time, you're doing just shy of $3 billion. In fact, $4 billion, right? Just shy of $4 billion. Yeah. You have to do that whilst you also spend this $3 billion in the sector. And that's not the only place you're going to spend.
So now listen to me.
How are you going to get the
money?
Go
and read the budget. You would find that in our budget, the current budget that is squeezing the space, there is almost $6 billion for debt service. Okay? That's $6 billion in there for debt service. Who are they going to give that money to? If you need $3 billion of that, as you claim, it is obvious that you have a space of another $3 billion. So it's not as if all of a sudden debt service is completely removed from our budget and somehow or another we are introducing a debt service that doesn't exist. debt service is already in our budget, calculated and approved as part of the appropriation. To the best of my knowledge, the government has not come to amend the appropriation. What it simply means, the government is still committed to spend over 6-7 billion on debt service. So if that space is already there, why are you complaining that there's no space? When there's a space to cater for debt service of about 7 billion, and we are looking at something around 3 billion. Of course, also understand that we currently have a revenue budget of about 176 billion Ghana cedis. That 176 billion Ghana cedis plus a deficit of about 50 billion is giving out 226 billion. Okay? We are not going to be repeating the kind of things that they are doing. What is squeezing their fiscal space is the president hiring private jet. Who won't do that? Come in. Let me.
I'll come. I'll
for the sake of our viewers, we must appreciate this.
So that's what you're going to make in your statement.
I'm saying that fiscal space you are complaining about, that 226 billion of our budget includes the president flying private jet. It includes the whole day dark that they call the National Cathedral. It includes all the waste that you can see in the system. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama is not going to build a national cathedral. John Mahama is not going to fly private jet. And so don't pigeonhole us based on the choices that the MPP is making. But we are going to make more superior choices that lead to more better efficiency in allocating resources.
Dongo, is the economy broke or not?
Yes, the economy is broke. But it doesn't mean that.
But if the economy is broke,
yeah,
where do you find 3 billion to spend in
And I've showed you that already that broke economy has a budget of 7 billion in debt service.
That's not a broke economy.
What do you mean?
If the economy is broke and yet still has fiscal space,
when your economy is not broke, you pay your debt. You don't go cap in hand begging people to forgive your debt. So when you decide that you are incapable of paying your debt and you go around restructuring, it is not for me to tell you your economy is broke.
So the economy is broke.
Yes.
But you still will find first investors who are going to be pumping at least 7 billion into
not to government.
I know, but at least they still must find it attractive enough to bring their
exactly the point.
And then government will also still find 3 billion to make 10 billion.
Yes.
To push as far as infrastructure is concerned.
That is a very attractive over a period of 4 years. Let me tell you, we just didn't come to this figure by conjecture. Way back in 2015, the Africa Development Bank put together a document on Ghana and said that Ghana needed to invest an average of $2 billion a year in order to eliminate infrastructure deficit and be competitive. It is the reason under His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, he was pushing infrastructure. It was informed by the fact that we needed to scale up and do 2 billion a year. After 8 years, you expect that figure to go up to say 2.5 billion. So over 4 years, you are looking at 10 billion. So we just didn't conjecture this figure. We are dealing with evidential analysis that suggests from a credible institution such as Africa Development Bank that says that in order to eliminate infrastructure deficit and to become competitive in the global space and improve and accelerate economic development, you must do an.
So that document establishes the need
for 2.5 billion a year.
Let me ask you then.
And I'm saying that in our budget, the current budget, the taxes that we are paying, all the monies that we are making, over 7 billion of that is going to debt service. It is that same debt service you are talking about 3 billion of it. So still there's a room of about almost 4 billion. In addition,
so you're going to be funding that through taxes.
In addition to the fact, it is going to be dealing with realigning existing revenues and realigning expenditures to fit our priorities. And our priorities are different from national category.
One of your priorities is 24-hour economy.
Yes.
And I mentioned Joe Mahama did a brilliant job over the weekend by giving us a very pictorial understanding of what this is. One job, 3 shifts, 3 people.
3 people,
right? What it means fundamentally is that you will have to employ additional 2 people.
Yes.
That is increasing public expenditure. And you know, over the years, one of the biggest line items in the budget that always competes with our interest payments and debt has been the wage bill. You are increasing that wage bill twofold.
I think you didn't pay attention. And I'm happy that you, of all people, is thinking the way our friends are thinking. This is what do you call it, 133. It's not essentially public sector wage bill.
I'm talking about public sector here.
And I'm saying that, so you cannot say that we need to employ three people.
There is the private sector part.
Will you let me
just
make
a
my
second.
point?
Just for clarity, no.
Yes.
There's a private sector bit.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you because
Yeah.
you being government, if you win.
Yes.
So I'm talking about the public sector. For example, he mentioned another example that if you go to the passport office, for example,
Yes.
why should they close at 5?
Yes.
So the passport office, he gave an example,
Yes.
right? We'll have 3 shifts.
Yes.
Currently, they'll have 1 person doing that
Yes.
job. Now you need 2 more people so they can do your 3
So
shifts. You are going to be employing 2 more people.
Your understanding is that the passport office employs 50% of the labor force on the public wage bill?
No, I'm talking about the public sector
I'm
generally.
asking, so why are you narrowing a project that is meant to be intentional about encouraging private sector optimization of their resources?
No, but I'm not asking about the private sector.
No, because then you must give me,
I'm
what
asking
numbers
about
are
the
you
public
giving?
sector. Are you?
Yeah, and
are
I'm
you
suggesting that
implementing the public sector
I'm
too or
suggesting
not?
to you that narrowing this additional tool to the public sector is disingenuous.
No, it's not
Because the tool we are talking about is not the public sector.
No, it's not because
Yes.
your policy, the 24-hour economy,
Yes.
is private sector and public sector.
Yes, and in public sector,
True.
not all agencies are susceptible to the application.
No problem. But
Yes.
I'm
So
saying
you
for
cannot use
the
that.
public sector agencies
Yes.
that you will implement this
Yes.
with,
Yes.
they would have to employ more people.
I agree with you.
That's my question to you.
Yeah, that is so. But that is not to
my
suggest that.
fundamental question to you is that for
Yes.
those public sector agencies
Yes.
that will employ more people,
Yes.
that is going against everything that we've read in the IMF program.
Which IMF?
That says that, quote, primary expenditure, I'm quoting from the
Yeah,
document
yeah.
directly, quote, primary expenditure will be reduced by 2% of GDP, with most savings coming from II, lower capital expenditures thanks to prioritization of projects, but III, a compression of real public sector wages, bringing the wages down and compressing it, because we know over the period, every IMF program have said, controlling your wage bill is an important point.
Yeah.
But you are going to be employing more people for these agencies.
Yes.
That's my question to you.
Because as a country, we do know that we have a big problem to solve. That problem is a teeming unemployed youth who must find jobs. And we are saying that this IMF program, we have signaled that we will engage the IMF to have a further conversation of the IMF program. And if we believe that opening and giving opportunity to our youth is the most important thing to us, we would engage the IMF on
We
it.
are increasing the wage bill.
I am saying that, but if you are increasing the wage bill, but you are introducing a program that increases productivity fourfold, are you suggesting that productivity and output that is increased by fourfold, leading to an improvement in your GDP, doesn't reflect in your tax base? Is that what you are suggesting? That if I grow my economy by making sure that an asset that was delivering to only one person, that asset is being maximized over 24 hours, said that I'm going to get more volumes, I'm going to be able to export more, I'm going to be able to produce more for our economy, and by implication, I'm going to have a bigger income. Out of that bigger income is what government takes to fund its activities. And if government is going to get more money to fund its activity through the expansion of the economy, what are you complaining about?
So, Mike, just for clarity, you're saying that you will renegotiate the IMF program.
Exactly. We have signaled that.
And remove this restriction
I have said,
on public sector wages and compression.
Don't put words in.
I'm just asking for clarity.
I have said that in renegotiating the IMF program, we are going to show that we have a strategy which will lead to an increase in our GDP, increase productivity, increase private sector value in terms of investment and in terms of how they use those investments. And that will lead to an increase in our revenue base And for which reason we are going to get more money to be able to fund that additional wage bill that you are complaining about.
So the IMF
and because
should
that,
lift that restriction in the program.
That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we are going to demonstrate that we are going to have a bigger economy. We are going to create bigger jobs. We are going to create decent jobs. We are going to make sure that the economy responds to this intentional policy that will lead to, let me give you an example. I'm a rice farmer, okay? If you introduce agric mechanization, agric mechanization services, and you say that the youth in, say, Yagaba Kubori, okay, should go into rice farming, but the government would go and negotiate with chiefs and people to acquire the land. All you need to do is to come and register and say that I am interested in farming. Government comes to prepare your land with tractors. Government provides you with weedicides and fertilizer. Government gives you improved seedlings, improved seeds that allows you to cultivate this land and spray this farm and wait till harvest. During harvest, government comes with combined harvesters. Harvest for you. But government through the Exim Bank, okay, through the Exim Bank, would have leveraged development finance to provide more money to Exim Bank, so that Exim Bank can give private sector players the opportunity to set up rice processing factories in that enclave. So when you harvest the rice, this rice processing factory will come, buy the rice, we deduct all the inputs we have given you, and give you your money to live your life. But again, when the rice is bought, the paddy rice are bought, remember that rice is produced at one point in time. So you are going to have huge volumes of rice that must be processed for the entire year. At that point in time, that is where the 24-hour economy will come in to say that, look, your machinery should not stop working after 8 hours. Whether you are working 8 hours or 24 hours, the amount of money you spend to buy the equipment is still the same. So why don't you optimize those inputs by making sure that you run 24 hours? We are going to give you incentives such as smart meters that reduce your cost of electricity and other incentives that allow you to be on your feet and gives you tax incentives. So you are encouraging the youth who are unemployed to become farmers, earn more money, and government sees a bigger GDP. 2, you are going to see the processing factories recruiting more people than they ordinarily would have recruited, so that instead of one job, you are now doing the 133. So you are going to have more people who are employed and be able to earn more money for the state.
But for the public sector, you have to increase the numbers in terms of number of people employed before you can hopefully see the returns down the line. Short or medium term.
Yes, and I'm saying that
but in the short term, when you increase the numbers, how do you pay for it? What's the fundamental question I'm asking you?
What you need to understand that economic management is not an event. It's a process. So no IMF man will come and see a program which over 4 years will make Ghana better and think about the initial bottlenecks. That is not economic management.
But I asked you this question.
That is an economic activity.
You already have a framework within which you need to play, which is the IMF program.
And that is the program we want to negotiate. You see, what they did was not a national program. Were you consulted? Did you hear anybody consulting anybody? This was a desktop research. We want to have a truly Ghanaian IMF program. And that is why we will bring line-minded people and experts to come together and brainstorm on the ways forward to achieve fiscal consolidation. How do we deal with the problem with monetary policy that we are seeing today, such that we are able to anchor interest rates, we are able to anchor exchange rates, and we are able to anchor, inflation. That conversation will have to be had as to the kind of framework we need to facilitate and ensure we have efficient inflation targeting. When the IMF is aware that the Bank of Ghana itself needs to be retooled, the Bank of Ghana Act itself will require several changes and amendments. So we are going to put on the table a program, not an event, that will suggest that, yes, initially we'll have difficulties over 1 year or 6 months, but if you progress it, you will see that eventually Ghana becomes a better place. Our output is higher. For instance, we have a program to turn Ghana into the hub for pharmaceutical industry. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, when he was president, under the leadership of Honorable Haruna Iddrisu at the Ministry of Trade, we provided a lot of support to the pharmaceutical sector. Now we have a program that wants to mainstream 24-hour economy so that we are able to expand the production base of our pharmacies.
So this is the private sector?
And yes. And then on the basis of that, more people get jobs, we get more output, we are able to sell to our neighboring countries, Burkina, Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, and turn Ghana into a hub.
I mean, for the private sector, of course, I mean, there's a lot there to wait for. But for the public sector where you have full control, there's a bit more question there about. So which public sector agencies are you implementing this with?
So you mentioned...
Because you're talking about productive...
You mentioned DVLA.
DVLA, yes.
How many? DVLA.
Yeah.
Okay, to improve the turnaround time. Passport, to improve the turnaround time. So those state agencies that lend itself to the application of 24-hour economy, we will seek to deal with that. For instance, the security services. We will need to provide security. People should be able to...
But the security services already work 24 hours, don't they?
Yes, but the numbers will be bigger because you see, filling stations, when you are going home, you see that they close because of security.
But you're going to employ more men into the security services.
Exactly the point.
But don't they have enough already? They are employing 10,000 that you're complaining about already.
If they have enough, we'll redeploy. But don't forget that the security arrangement also include private security companies. That is the architecture we are developing. To bring in the private sector in helping to provide security. So not all the bill, the wage bill on security will be on the state. Part of it will be on private security companies. And that will provide more opportunity for our youth to get employed in decent jobs. And at the end of the day, the effect is that we are expanding the frontiers of productivity.
Yeah, but if you recruit more police officers so that you can police shops and businesses 24/7.
Not shops, and we provide security. It's about patrolling.
Security.
You don't have to. We are not going to station one police officer to be sitting.
That is what I meant.
No,
that's what I meant.
So
I mean, to provide security.
A whole area is mapped up.
Generally.
There's patrol and all of that. So it is not like anybody who is doing 24-hour economy, you are entitled to a police officer.
But my point to you is that the current government is employing 10,000 security officers that you were complaining about. Isn't that what you are in essence proposing right now?
So when they are recruiting 10,000 security officers, to what effect? What is the impact on the economy? What is the impact on productivity?
But isn't the same thing you're proposing? That if you have more
we are proposing
they can provide better
we are bringing
security for the businesses.
Yes, so that they can work 24 hours. They are not providing for security for you to come and provide surveillance for you to work 24 hours. Our policy is intentional.
How would you decide which agency to implement this with? What will be the criteria for selection of an agency?
Of course, first and foremost, your operations should be amenable to 24 hours. If your operations are said that you cannot do 133, you are not part of that. It is not possible. So we will select entities and agencies whose operations lend itself to 133, the 24-hour economy. That is one. Two, we will be interested in how we can assist those agencies and entities scale up their operations. So if you have an agency or a business that cannot go beyond 2 people because of the nature of its operations, why do you do 24-hour economy? So because we want to be able to, an agency that is capable of scaling up. For instance, if you decide that the 10 billion push, you decide to retool domestic airports and provide the capacity for our airlines to fly at night. What it means is that Africa World, who goes to lease an aircraft, sometimes wet lease, which means that they lease the aircraft and lease the crew. And they are paying for 24 hours, and yet they use them for 8 hours. If we are capable of providing our airport in Bolga as we plan to do, retool airports so that it is possible for those aircraft to be up there 24 hours instead of being grounded for 16 hours. What it means is that you are creating more
jobs. Is that even commercially viable?
Why? Why is it not?
How many people want to travel to Bolga 24 hours a day? Do you have the traffic that will make it commercially viable for the business?
Yes, but the fact that when you say 24 hours, the crew people, they go to Bolga, okay? They leave Bolga. They say that, okay, Bolga, after 10, we are not getting people. But Kumasi is there. You go to Kumasi.
But Kumasi is already
yeah, but Kumasi, we are not flying 24 hours.
But
Who is
Kumasi,
flying? Go to the airport at 2 a.m. and see whether we get an aircraft there.
Yeah, because nobody flies at that time.
No, it is because it is not intentionally constituted to operate like that.
No, but it has to be commercially viable to say necessarily that you're getting more hands and employing more people. So flights, you must have flights flying
so
in there.
What do you need to understand?
On a regular basis
do you need
to do that?
What you need to understand? That
isn't that what really should motivate where the 24-hour economy goes?
It is not going to be the business of government to go around telling businessmen to do a feasibility on whether you can fly 24 hours or you cannot. It is for you to make a business case.
The business itself.
Exactly.
So this is not automatic.
No. But it's one decision, one factory automatic. It is intentional. It is not automatic.
And your hope is that you create an environment for them to
do that. Because when you do it, there are incentives that come with it. And it makes it attractive for you to do so.
What incentives?
I mentioned that you were not listening. I said that we'll have tax incentives. We will make sure that...
No, but I still ask what incentives? Tax incentive is very broad. It doesn't say anything. What incentive? What tax incentive?
At this stage, you want me to tell you all the tax incentives?
Of course.
Okay, so...
You said you've thought through the policy.
We can give you incentives on making sure that you don't pay corporate tax up to some point.
We can. Is this something that you definitely do? You're speculating.
That is the reason why, in fleshing out this policy into a workable document, we are going to have a national consultative program.
But I thought this is well thought through.
Yes.
Considering that this is a policy that was in your 2020 manifesto.
Yes.
This is not new.
No, let me tell you something.
This is not new.
A policy is not...
in fact, it is in the NDPC document.
Yes, but in the NDP document...
And in 2024, you still haven't fleshed it out.
No, I am saying that it's not that we haven't fleshed. I'm telling you that some of the details will require you to engage the agencies and the stakeholders.
Talk about tax incentives.
Yes.
You should know what certain tax incentives you're going to be giving businesses.
I've told you corporate taxes.
So you give, okay.
Yeah, we'll give corporate taxes.
What else?
If there are businesses that are important, already in the manifesto, we have told you that if you import equipment and vehicle, for purposes of manufacturing, we will give you exemptions for that. We have also indicated that part of the exemptions you are going to get is that when you import your raw materials, we'll give you tax rebates for that. So we are very clear that tax incentives would accompany this policy, but the optimal levels would still require engagement with the beneficiary agencies.
I want to go on to another big intervention. Since you're talking about tax incentives, you actually want to scrap a few taxes. E-levy, COVID levy, betting tax, emission levy, industrial and agricultural import duties. Now, if you look at the 2024 budget, it's projected by the Finance Ministry that for betting tax, e-levy, and COVID-19 levy, for example, the revenues should be around 8 billion in 2025. That is revenue that you will lose once you scrap. How are you plugging that gap?
That revenue that we are giving out, remember that that money is going to a group of the poor and the vulnerable. Okay? Our mothers and our grandmothers who are paying through their roof for e-levy, we see it more of a social intervention to support those people, not to give up money that their children are sending to them for their medicines and for their upkeep to government. Betting tax. We have not been able to create jobs for our youth. Whether you like bet or you don't like it, that is not the question. The question is that having failed the youth, you cannot now be saying that you are tying the hands of the youth in searching for their own opportunities. And when they get those opportunities, you are standing by the gate to take part of it. Emission tax, if you look at the operations of emission tax itself, if you ask them, they are struggling to implement it. So when we scrap those, and we are able to provide those decent jobs that we are anticipating will come up with our 24-hour economy, those incentives that we are putting together and the policy orientation that we have, which will conserve foreign currency, because we are going to produce a lot of the things ourselves, and we're going to expand productivity. It should be possible for you to look at the expanded economy and the income base that you are going to tax from to be able to plug that loophole of the fiscal impact of giving out these taxes. At the moment, government is collecting those taxes, but the same government is looking around to say that we want to cushion your hardships. Why not give him his money to decide what he wants to do with it?
I mean, you know, the challenge you face in 2025, and everybody faces, and you paint the picture best when I hear you talk on the floor.
Yes.
It's going to be a very gloomy 2025.
Exactly.
Many have predicted it's going to be worse than 2024.
Yes.
So when you have an opportunity to increase revenue, but then you are taking away $8 billion from your revenue pool,
yes.
and at the same time, you want to spend more to help the same people, because a lot of the things you promise is to help the poor. So you're taking the taxes, you're losing $8 billion, and you want to spend more. You are cutting revenue and increasing expenditure. That tells me, that sounds like a story of what we've gone through.
No. Let me tell you something. You are picking out of $226 billion of national budget. Where those monies are going, we won't send them to those places. Do you understand that? We won't send $226 billion into the kind of things that they are doing with those monies. If we take out $8 billion, we are going to get $218 billion that we can deploy in order to be more efficient in allocating those resources. And we have demonstrated to you that the waste in the system, the kind of expenditure, they went and dumped. Next time you come to Upper East, go and see the one village, one dam. And you weep for Ghana. Go and see how much money they pump there. We are not going to pump those monies in those places. Go and find out from them, NAPCO, how much they spent and where are the children. Go and find out from them. Go and find out from them 1 million per constituency. Go to Upper East, Boga, and tell me how many of those projects have been completed. They are just roaming, they are just there, white elephants. So we are going to be more efficient in allocating the resources. And as a result, dealing with $8 billion of support to ordinary Ghanaians that need their hardship to be elevated is about the best use to which you can put that money. And that is exactly what we are going to do. In addition to that, you are going to have a bigger purse.
How?
Because you are going to expand output.
But that won't happen in a year.
We are talking about the totality of 4 years.
Yes.
So is that not what we are talking about?
Yes, but when do you begin to see those returns?
I'm saying that over a 4-year period, by the second year, you see the fruits.
Really?
Yes. By the end of the second
year. That sounds miraculous.
Miraculous?
And an economy that you say is broke, you can turn it around in 4 years to begin to see the returns that will now plug all these loopholes.
I'm saying that economy is already giving me 218 or 226 billion. You didn't hear that?
Well, of course, but that is coming
in. You didn't hear that?
Once it comes in, you are spending already.
But did you hear that?
Yeah, of course.
So don't talk as if we are now going to start from start looking for money.
No, but that money is woefully inadequate, and you know this, because of all the expenditure that you have.
Why won't it be inadequate when you are digging a hole in the name of National Cathedral? Why won't it be inadequate when all you do is to dole out $12 million to people for no work done? Why wouldn't it be inadequate? If what your president does is to fly to Barbados by a private jet, go to Trinidad and Tobago with private jet,
how much you
and be paying $17,000 an hour, $70,000 an hour, that the president decides that my childhood dream is to watch my club, Spurs, play in the Champions League final. Okay? So when you take all of that out and you decide to start from zero in allocating resources, and rationalizing expenditure and say that this thing that you were doing, we are not going to do it like that. Do you understand that? So obviously, we are not starting from a position where we are going to raise money from zero budget. We already have tax measures and tax laws already passed. Just like they came to inherit those laws, we would also inherit those laws.
Yeah, except that the challenge you have is that money is there and is guaranteed, as you've mentioned. The budget always tells us that. But you're going to have more pressure on that small money, considering that a lot of the debt has been restructured. You have to begin bearing.
You still don't want to agree that in the budget,
they still have made provision for
there's a provision of $7 billion sitting in that budget.
Yes. But you also must admit
I'm coming.
That $7 billion will grow exponentially from 2025 going.
It will not.
Because a lot more of your debt will fall due.
You have told me what that quantum is.
Yes.
So you are no longer now going to look for another figure. You gave me a figure of $3 billion as the figure we should be anticipating to pay. And I'm saying that...
And that, by the way, is just the...
I'm coming. So I'm dealing with your numbers. And I'm saying that you are saying that if I have $7 billion to deal with the same problem, $3 billion of that being spent is too much. I am not going to find... That money already sits in the budget. It's already provided for in the budget. Okay? And I'm saying that $7 billion, I'm going to spend $3 billion. I have an additional $4 billion of fiscal space to spend.
Just before we wrap up, I need to ask you this about the cedi, because that's everybody's biggest pain.
Yes.
How do you stabilize the cedi? I see in your manifesto that you say you want to stabilize the cedi through an urgent economic recovery program to shore up our foreign reserves. That's saying pretty little, in fact, saying absolutely nothing. How exactly? Bawumia says you do this through go for oil.
We have a better plan.
What's that?
Foreign exchange. About 60% of our foreign exchange comes from just two sources. One is food imports. And we have told you how we are going to transform agriculture to produce our own food. I just told you just at Yagba Kubori how the youth there, supported with agricultural services that we will provide, will be able to produce enough rice, said that we don't import rice. So the pressure on the cedi resulting from the excessive demand of forests to buy rice won't come in. Two, we are adopting a strategy of 24-hour economy, which requires us to exponentially increase our output, which is import substitution. So if you put these two together, you are already dealing with about 60 to 70% of our forest problem. Somebody has no idea he's talking about gold for oil. A policy that the IMF, you have signed on to the IMF that you are abolishing. And IMF says, transit from this arrangement, don't do it again. Then you come and deceive us that you want to expand it.
So you stop the gold for oil policy?
Upfront. In fact, we are investigating it. We are not only stopping it. It is part of our manifesto promise.
Yes.
That we investigate. That the Auditor General says that they did not find any agreement covering this gold for oil arrangement. What it means is that you have people who just go to Bank of Ghana, take gold, they go to buy oil. Whether they bring the oil or not, we don't know. We don't have any guarantee that in the event that something goes bad, we'll get our money back. And you think that we should continue this scam, this loot and share? We will investigate it. And there's no way gold for oil will last one day.
Isaac Anogo, thank you very much.
It is my pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.